Let me open the program today by asking this question. Where do you get your news, and do you trust your news source?
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
Living in the United States, as I do, honestly, when I look at the news sources that are considered mainstream here in the United States, I frankly don't trust any of them. I mean, I'll come right out and say it. I do not trust CNN. Absolutely do not trust CNN. I do not trust the New York Times. They have been caught lying over and over and over again to force a political agenda. I do not trust NBC, the National Broadcasting Company. I do not trust ABC, the American Broadcasting Company. And I do not trust CBS at all. I don't trust any of the main networks in the United States. When it comes to MSNBC, those people are just crazy. There's not anything of honesty about them. They are all for nonsense and idiocy, things that don't even make any sense, like Green New Deals that cost trillions that will never work. They're politically in for just a few things. They believe that they are going to be the rulers of the universe and the most respected people. Because, see, when you work for a company like, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, if you're on that TV set, you're paid lots of money. And you can believe anything you want because you're protected with your big paycheck. They hire their own lawyers and accountants to minimize their tax payouts. And it's for the Moloch worship of abortion that they literally hate certain people. Literally hate, with a capital H. When the United States was founded, many, over 2 centuries ago, the Founding Fathers anticipated and wanted a reliable and honest press. Because with a reliable and honest press, it would keep people in the political world in check. It would be a check and balance and keep them honest by having a free press. That's why we have the concept in the First Amendment to the Constitution regarding freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and yes, even freedom of religion to express your religion without any interference from the government. But I've watched in my lifetime the intrusions of government into things that they have absolutely no business being involved in at all. They always find an excuse. There's always a way to get the camel's nose under the tent and in. And once you do that, government comes in and begins to rule too much of our lives. Now, I know this program, this weekend edition of Truth to Ponder, also known as your weekend show on a few radio stations, I know this program is listened to not just in the United States, but also in a number of nations around the world. And I want to tell those that are in places that are not the United States, if you're getting your information about the United States through secondary sources like the Associated Press, Reuters, CNN, you're being lied to. Every day, willingly, they knowingly lie to you because they are in bed politically with one party. They'll prop up this one party because the one party has no moral accountability left at all. And either do the talking heads on these networks. They hate Christians. They hate conservatives. They hate the regular family. They despise it. They want to tear it apart, and they want to use the power of the Democrat Party in the United States to accomplish that goal. There is a congresswoman you probably have heard about in the United States from New York, the former 20-something-year-old bartender, who, if she actually got a degree from Yale, oh man, that school is in deep trouble if they're turning out complete idiots like her. And I call her that trying to be graceful. There's some very stupid things that come pouring out of her mouth. She has no concept of economics, no concept of reality. She lives in a fairyland world. AOC, Alexandria Ortiz. I worry about my nation when I see the likes of the Green New Deal. They don't understand money doesn't grow on trees. It comes from somebody's effort and work. I listen to them say things like, well, just tax the wealthy more. They're too ignorant, unknowing to realize you could confiscate the wealth of every considered wealthy person in the United States. Take their money, take their retirement funds, take their savings account, make them homeless, take their houses and their cars, put them out on the street, and you still wouldn't have enough money to pay for this foolishness. All in the name of climate change. And that's another thing we'll get into in just a little bit. The lie of climate change. I'll turn 66 in a couple of weeks from now. Literally a couple of weeks from now. Since 1970, the first Earth Day, I attended it as a high school student on a cool, slightly rainy day in May in upstate New York. And I can remember being told we had less than 10 years left if we didn't do something immediately. I've been hearing we have 10 years or 5 years or 12 years left for the last 50 years. And you want to know something? This is the dirty secret that NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Compost, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, these are the things they don't want you to know, is that every prediction ever made that was supposed to have occurred by now, every climate change prediction ever made in 50 years that was supposed to have occurred right now. Did you hear me? I want to make sure you got this. Every prediction that the climate alarmists have made in the last 50 years that should have occurred by now have never happened. But you keep believing the garbage that they are dispensing, and they're using the educational system to indoctrinate kids to believe that if we don't do something in the next 10 years, there'll be no world left for them when they graduate high school or finish college. They're being lied to daily by the propagandists in the media. There are a handful of independent journalists, and I know some in the United States to say Fox News, they're okay. I don't even trust them half the time anymore. I really don't. I think some of the numbers, figures, politically, and others are just not right. Predictions that they've made in politics have also been wrong, like all of them. Why do you think I started a program called Truth to Ponder? Because I'm tired of the lies that float around as substitute truth that we're seeing in the world today. I'm tired of a lot of things. Maybe I'm getting old and cranky. I don't care. But I need to say these things, especially to an international audience. You're being lied to. There's such a power play going on right now. And I'm going to come out and say it from a biblical point of view. What does St. Paul say? We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. That's the real enemy. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 3, here's some sobering words. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming. and even now is already in the world. Let me say that again. This is what is said in 1 John chapter 4, verse 3. This is the spirit of Antichrist, which you have heard is coming, and even now is already in the world. Now, before I go any farther, let me just stop for a second and remind you that you are listening to the program Truth to Ponder. And our website is truth2ponder.com. Truth, 2ponder.com. Also, from time to time, I've been receiving some wonderful cards and letters from people that are actually writing the program. And let me just give you the address now. I'll give it again later in the program. You can reach me at our address in Georgia, where we are for this fall season into winter. And that is 21 Berkshire Lane, 21 Berkshire, Berkshire, 21 Berkshire Lane. Add the number 263 after that. That's our very unique little P.O. box system up here in our little tiny community. 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, Sky Valley, 2 words, Sky Valley, the city, Georgia, zip code 30537. That's Sky Valley, Georgia, zip code 30537, United States of America. 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, Sky Valley, Georgia, 30537, USA. Now, let's get back to thinking about what was said by John when he said the spirit of Antichrist is already in this world. We were warned 2,000 years ago about the kind of things that have been happening in our world from time to time. It is the spirit of Antichrist that is in the world. You would think, with all the immense and spectacular technology at our fingertips, my little phone that I have in my hand right now, not a very super expensive one, it's a Samsung, it's an Android, it's not an iPhone. And on this thing, I can be on the internet, I can send messages, I can take literally theater quality video with this thing. You'd think with all this marvelous technology at our fingertips, we could do better in our world than we have. Yet we are still power hungry. We are still disobedient, breakers of treaties. We are still everything bad in human nature that is possible. And the worst part is much of the bad things about our culture are now being codified into law by those in authority that are now worshiping the beast or the Antichrist. There are a lot of people we've talked about on this program numerous times that try to make money off you and hustle you, for their end-time prophecies that are always wrong. I understand the desire for knowledge. I understand the desire to know things and being prepared. I get it. I get it immensely. But I don't like being lied to. I don't like it when governments lie to me, whether it's at the local, whether it's the county, whether it's at the state, federal government. I don't appreciate governments anywhere in the world lying to their people, and they do. They do. And they deceive many. This election season, let me just come back to the United States for just a moment. Then we're going to travel overseas and look at a couple of things that are happening around the world that's deeply disturbed me. From England and Australia and other locations, things that I'm seeing being said and being done that I find troubling. There's no doubt, because the spirit of Antichrist has been in this world all this time, that there are times of immense tribulation, warfare, economic upheaval, nations rising against nations, kingdoms against kingdoms. We've seen it since the day that Jesus ascended into heaven. This world has not really been at peace. There's always been some kind of trouble, anger, or warfare, or disease breaking out and occurring in our world. There have always been despots desiring to get power over individuals like you and I. The lust for power, the desire to rule. I remember about 12, 13 years ago now, when you understand the kind of government that most Western democracies, I don't like that term because a democracy is really a very dangerous thing. A pure democracy is basically satanic, and here's why. A pure democracy does not protect the weakest among us. A pure democracy is like two wolves and a sheep having a discussion and a vote on what's for dinner tonight. The sheep will lose. That's why the United States was founded as a republic. So my skin, the hair on my back of my neck goes up every time a Nancy Pelosi gets on the TV and talks about our democracy. We are not a democracy. The word democracy is not even found in the United States Constitution. We are a republic, a representative republic. We democratically elect representatives who then will do their best on all of our behalf, is the theory. We have a republic. As Benjamin Franklin said, as long as you can keep it. And I'm troubled that we may not be able to keep it for too much longer, as we are being misinformed by the satanic public school system that is rising up around the United States. And I say that knowing there's some good people within the public schools, but increasingly, the Antichrist is taking over the school systems. A lot of parents discovered that in the United States because of the coronavirus. And they're beginning to see some of the things that were happening in their schools, and they're not really happy about it. You have school districts that want parents to sign a form saying they will not observe their children and what they're learning. What are they afraid of? Why are they so scared that you might see what they are indoctrinating our children into? If you have any way to, if you are a parent or a grandparent, you need to start praying, how do we get these kids out of these satanically operated indoctrination centers that are funded with taxpayer dollars? Why do the schools want to shut down charter schools that give better education? Why do they want to keep this monopoly going? A few weeks ago, I told you about someone that I know. I know two people. One graduated high school, one is going to, allegedly next year. They can't do third and fourth grade work, but they're going to be high school graduates. They're going to, if we don't have social distancing restrictions next spring, summer, they'll get to wear a cap and gown and look like they know something. And they're functionally illiterate. We spend $20,000 to $24,000 per student per year in this country to educate kids. That means a classroom of 20 students, you have $500,000 to educate 20 students per year. The smallest church in America, for $500,000, could hire 3 or 4 or 5 teachers and far exceed the quality of education that comes out of our despicable public school system in the United States today. It's an embarrassment. I looked over what someone shared with me, an actual historical document you can find at this museum in Salinas, Kansas. This was the 8th grade examination. Many, many years ago, back when I was a kid, 50 years ago, you'd hear about some adult that only had like an eighth grade education. You thought, man, that guy must be stupid. He must not know anything. When you read the stuff that they had to know in terms of mathematics, grammar, and history, and science, the typical college graduate would fail. Today's Yale graduate would probably fail this test. This was what was expected in little Salinas, Kansas, back in 1895. Today, I can't think of any high school student I know that would pass this, because they're not being taught any history. They're not really being taught the proper way to use English in many school districts. It is truly an embarrassment. Our schools are a wreck. Our churches, because of coronavirus, many are in disarray, not knowing what to do. And we're being misled and lied to by our media. And I have a question. Why? Why this desire to lie? Why this desire to spread fear? Why this desire to divide people into groups? One of the things about being a citizen of the United States I learned 50 years ago was the power of the individual. We're given individual liberties. This is our God-given liberties. But today they want to assign us into groups. You're liberal, you're conservative, you're black, you're white, you're Hispanic, you're this, you're that, you're the other. Everything is by groups. The individual is no longer a worthy concept. We are to be molded little drones put into our little divided groups. The old saying is, united we stand, divided we fall. We're being divided against each other. We're no longer Americans in the United States. You're no longer Canadians in Canada. You're no longer Australians in Australia. You are groups fighting against groups. And I believe that is all by satanic design. Yeah, I'm being very strong in what I'm saying here, because these are things that need to be said. And I see the church failing on so many fronts. We'll be talking about that in part 2 of the program. Let me share just a couple of quick stories that I've run across. And you look about the coronavirus and some of the really weird things that are going on. You look at Australia. You look at what's happening in England. I'll give you an example. There was an anti-lockdown protest in the city of London, England. Happened about a week or so ago. Protesters and one officer, they were medically treated after a clash as these officers attempted to shut down an anti-government protest against Britain's heavy-handed coronavirus restrictions. And these people have this idea, we do not consent, and I don't blame them. These lockdowns, the way people are being treated in Australia in particular, is almost Nazism. It's what I would expect from the SS and the Gestapo, what they're doing in Australia. A once free country, and I hate to be that way, but it's gone to the insane. Knocking people down, arresting pregnant people, not letting someone cross a, quote, state line in Australia to get to a hospital. That person died, by the way, and it wasn't of coronavirus, because of these insidious and satanically inspired laws. And I say that for a number of reasons. Number one, I'm going to share with you some honest statistics. If anybody watched or heard about the presidential debate this past week on Tuesday in the United States, what a show that was. We're just at a point now that we can't even communicate. No matter what you do, no good deed goes unpunished. Now, let me get back to what I was talking about when it comes to this coronavirus. There's some other stories, like I say, in Australia. I mean, look, people are in England. They've had enough. They gather. They protest. And it's funny, when the Black Lives Matter group and others protest, they're allowed to do it. When you want to protest against a government lockdown, they want to shut you down, arrest you, beat you over the head with a club, and lead you away to jail. You would think that the coronavirus was going to kill mega millions in the United States the way we are treated. It didn't, it doesn't, and it won't. We were lied to. I work in emergency management. I came out of retirement back in March and April, part of May. We were lied to. We're still being lied to. The goalposts keep getting moved. You can fly in an airliner, this little tube stuffed with people like sardines. And as long as you're wearing your foolish little face mask made out of paper, everybody's going to be fine. Flying for 2 or 3 hours in this tube. You can have 130, 150 people in a tube, only about 8.5 feet wide, 7 feet tall, and 100 and some odd feet long. Stuff there, shoulder to shoulder, 3 to a seat. And somehow the virus will magically not spread if you're wearing a little paper face covering. What kind of stupidity is this? Look at the box. It says does not prevent the spread of coronavirus. It doesn't. Never has, never will. If you're wearing a mask to prevent you from getting it, I got news for you. It will not, period. In fact, it might make it even more so that you do get it. You're being lied to. The masks are worthless. They don't do what they claim. The mask theory has changed over and over and over again, constantly moving the goalpost. Yeah, I know this has been a long rant and rave, but these things are on my heart and mind, and I want to get them off my chest. I want you to be informed. I want you to stop accepting living a lie. That's why we're doing this program, Truth to Ponder. I've taken quite a bit of time in this segment, I know, to kind of give you some facts and figures and just some information. When I come back, I'm going to give you the real worldwide stats now in terms of percentages. And when you begin to understand the numbers and realize that we really didn't do anything to change them much at all, maybe your eyes will be opened. We'll be back right after this break.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to Truth to Ponder, part number 2, the second half of the program, also known as your weekend show in many places. We've been doing your weekend show since 2015. And we're now entering our second month of doing the program, Truth to Ponder, a weekday show, Monday through Friday. And the Friday edition also serves in many parts of the world as your weekend show. To give you an idea of some of the things that we're working about, this program talks about news, politics, culture, faith, and even our lifestyles. That's what Truth to Ponder is all about. And I look at what's going on, and I try to share with you in a very humble way. I'm just trying to be helpful. I opened the program, the first half, saying, where do you get your news from and do you trust it? I don't trust the news media any longer. Over and over again, they drop these big stories that end up not being true. Here in my country, the United States, you go back 4 years ago and it was like Russian collusion. We spent millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, 2.5 years of investigation. Turned up nothing. And what we're finding out now is that the real story is that they knew about it being all fake and being used as a campaign smear, but did nothing about it. Heads will roll, I pray, on that. You don't do that to the American people. You don't do that to anybody in any country. That's just malfeasance of your office to allow that. And if it isn't fixed, then we are in deeper trouble than I even assumed in the world and in the United States. Newspapers, television, openly lie every day. All for a political agenda. I was looking at some statistics the other day, and I need to kind of, get these up where I can see them here in a moment. But, we hear about the coronavirus and all the terrible things that can happen because of that coronavirus. And I look at these stats, and I'm trying to think for myself. What is the survival rate? The coronavirus has got everybody scared to death, running around wearing these silly masks on their face that doesn't do a thing. If you believe that mask is saving you, then you need to get rid of your public education system if you're believing this stuff. The survival rate, I'm looking at it right now. If you were to contract COVID-19 today, and look, I've had a couple of family members that have been sick with this, and a couple of friends around the country, but I have a lot of people I know that haven't been touched by it at all. So let's say you are, a newborn baby until about 20 years of age, okay? About 20 years of age. What is your survival rate? In other words, you're a 17-year-old high school student. If you were to come down with this and even show symptoms, and that's something else we'll get into. I did a lot of research because I did this work early on, and that's why I got so fed up with it. The nonsense that I was seeing. By seeing the data, your survival rate is 99.997% if you even contract the disease. If you're in high school, if you're in elementary school, if you're in middle school, junior high school, a daycare center, a preschool, if you were to even contract it, if your survival rate is 99.997%, if you're in that same age bracket and catch the regular flu, your odds of dying are a lot higher. So what about the next group? What about those that are, from their 20s to their middle age period, like, 20 to 49? That's a pretty good chunk of the country. If you were to contract the disease, once again, you have to come down with it. Your survival rate is 99.98%. 99.98%. What about people like me? I'm 66, and in a few years I'll be 69. What about people in that age bracket? The survival rate is 99.5%. Did you hear what I'm telling you? If I was to get it, the odds of my getting through it are 99.5%. The much older people that are in their 70s and 80s and 90s, well, their survival rate is 94.6%. Did you hear that? Even the elderly, the most vulnerable, 94.6%. That's the survival rate if you get it, if you contract this disease. So youngsters, school kids, even college students, you're roughly 99.99% survival rate or better if you get it. We're also seeing something that I find very, very concerning. A lot of these tests are coming back positive and nobody has any symptoms. So we're all being told, oh, that's because they're asymptomatic, but they'll spread the disease. There's no proof of that. It's been assumed, but there's no scientific proof of that. So your infant fatality ratio, if you're under the age of 20, is 0.00003%. If you're infected, your mortality rate. Up to about just under 50, then it goes to 0.0002%. Up to 70, 0.005%. Not 1%, not 5%, not 8%, not these ridiculous numbers that were being shoved at us back in March. The real infant fatality, the infection fatality ratio. It wasn't 6 or 7% or 10 or 3, all over the road numbers. We didn't know. Now, if you're an old geezer like me, it's 0.005%. Notice, 0.005, not 5, 0.005%. And those over 70, 0.054%. 0.054%. States like New York made a lot of mistakes. So did New Jersey and Connecticut early on, and that's why the death number seems so high. So we talk about these lockdowns that we've had to go through. Did they really accomplish anything? I remember reading so much material when I first went back into coming out of retirement and working for an emergency management agency. My job was to help keep the public informed, and I had to do a tremendous amount of reading, go to a lot of seminars, go to a lot of meetings, take a lot of notes, and try to put together a cohesive statement. And there were times that I felt like I'm not being told something here. This is not making sense. And frankly, I just got tired of it. I got tired of knowing that I'm sharing things that are probably not even 100% true or even fully researched. Then I started looking at some of the data coming in from places that have no political agenda. Talking about the original SARS-CoV virus of 2003 and 4, what we knew back then, suddenly being dismissed as, junk science today. Years of research. Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, Institute of Health, and places around the world all trying to understand the first outbreak. Not as many died because it was contained early on in China and quickly was able to be stopped before it got out of hand, unlike this virus, which was allowed out of China. See, that's what a lot of people are not understanding. This disease was permitted outside of China. Here are things we do know that are factual. Number one, when the problem started in Wuhan, China, travel from Wuhan to Beijing was curtailed and stopped. You couldn't go there. In other words, travel in China became restricted, but you could fly out of Wuhan to Italy, the United Kingdom, the United States, pretty much anywhere in the world. Just can't come to Beijing. And so willingly that virus spread rapidly. And I think I've talked to people and I'm leaning, there's enough, I don't want to say evidence, but there's enough coincidence that some of this stuff may have been already out in November in the United States and just barely getting out in November or December. It wasn't January, February. Today, something has changed since the beginning of this pandemic and the beginning of this virus. We have a lot of people that seem to get infected, but we're not filling up hospitals. Can you remember when CBS ran the bankrupt, intellectually, morally, spiritually, just in every way you can think, bankrupt bunch of liars at CBS television, using overseas footage of a small hospital being overwhelmed in Italy and trying to claim that was happening in New York City? It wasn't. Never did happen. We had all those ships. Remember the hospital ships that were sent up to New York, never used? All those hospitals set up in parks and buildings by the United States Army, Army Corps of Engineers, and private groups. Virtually never used, never needed. There were no 50 or 60 million very sick people running around and 3 and 4 million people dying like we were told would happen. And here's what you don't understand. Here's part of the lie. You know, Jesse Jackson, who I don't agree with on most things, did say something years ago that I do agree with. A half-truth is still a whole lie. Let me say that again. A half-truth is still a whole lie. And it's sometimes what we're not telling people. There's some of the information that seems to get left out about the infections and about all the stuff we're doing. I could play over and over again that line of Anthony Fauci talking about how masks don't do anything, don't wear one. And, of course, he had 50 years of research and science behind him. How that suddenly changed in a matter of weeks without all kinds of incredible testing that they would have had to have done and, controlled testing to find out that a mask stops this particular virus, when they've never been used for that purpose before. These are the kind of omissions that become the lie to the people. So if we have something that has such an incredibly low death rate, and then the CDC comes out, and even in spite of these very low numbers, okay, they're talking about people dying with comorbidity. In other words, some other disease. In other words, it wasn't just the coronavirus that killed somebody. The person had heart disease. Now, you may argue, but he may have not had that heart episode without the COVID. That's probably true. But anything else that came along, including the common cold, would. Back in 1998 and 99, I spent some time early in my ministry as a volunteer hospice chaplain, so I understand comorbidity. People that have an underlying condition that can kill them. And something as simple as a common cold, a simple fall, the flu, strep throat can kill them. Even allergies can tip people over the edge. I've seen it. And so I'm looking at this disease that has such an incredibly high rate of survival, and we're making such a big deal about it. My question is, why? We probably don't even know the true number of flu deaths because we've never set up anything as extravagant as we've been using for COVID-19 around the world that just happened to be built up for what happened to be just a coincidental pandemic exercise in October of last year. All this stuff that we're using to count was set up for a mock tabletop drill. Yeah, and somehow it all worked. I'm reading some interesting stories. We got all these people running around wearing a mask. And I'm looking at this story that came out of Victoria, Australia. They're looking for a suspect in connection with threats against a woman. And the police need their help, so they released a digital composite image of a person in a medical face mask and wearing sunglasses. And other than messy hair and a light complexion, there's no identifying characteristics. Good luck in trying to find this guy. It's not going to happen. But the same police department in Victoria has also been rightly criticized all over the world for roughing up old people for not wearing a face mask or properly socially distancing. They arrested a pregnant woman. This is massive police overreach. And you're listening to someone here that is a general supporter of the police, especially in what's going on in this country. Yeah, in this nation with the police being defunded and being just decimated. About a week or so ago, It was reported that police halted a search for a missing 14-year-old autistic boy who didn't come home from his regular route that he's permitted to be on. And they wouldn't let people come out because they were so afraid of the COVID-19 transmission. Somebody might get somebody infected. So nobody went out there searching for this 14-year-old boy. The police said, we can't use your help because, you people might spread it to somebody. And then we're all going to die. We're all going to die. Live in fear. Live in fear. The boy was found dead because nobody was out there to look for him. The boy was found dead because nobody was allowed to go out and look for him. They'll probably call that a COVID death too. They refused the public's health because they would be risking a violation of the orders that were put down by the dictator in Victoria. That you can't travel more than 5 kilometers from your home because somehow if you travel 5 kilometers plus 2 kilometers, you're going to infect somebody. This is stupid. This is the insanity. This is the syphilis of the brain that is just getting into the minds of world leaders today in their lust and quest for Hitler-type powers. We don't want your assistance because somebody might get sick. But it's okay if this 14-year-old dies. These officers arresting these anti-lockdown protesters, the same police, they bowed down to Black Lives Matter's protest earlier in before. They never made arrests due to face mask or social distancing, but they do now. The police force there has been authorized to enforce these stupid COVID-inspired restrictions about face masks that don't work, social distancing that may be questionable, not being allowed to gather, not being allowed to leave your home except during specific times for a list of specific reasons. Your papers, please. May I see your papers? Even their methods have been called out by Human Rights Watch. These powers have become abusive and random, and they raise a huge concern about the commitment to uphold human rights. Premier, or should I say the Fuhrer, Daniel Andrews, imposed curfews in order to give law enforcement the easiest set of rules to enforce, stating that these are not about human rights, but about human life. No, they're not. With a 99.997 survival rate, this is not about that. A new bill is coming up in the lower house in Victoria, which would expand the authority to even detain people during this crisis, this manufactured crisis. When the CDC says that 94% of those that die of COVID-19 had on average 2.6 other life-threatening issues. This has nothing to do. This is like Hitler telling the Jews to get on the boxcars for your safety. A pregnant mom was arrested in her home in her pajamas in front of her kids in Ballarat for organizing a socially distanced protest. In other words, done correctly, against the severe lockdown measures. In other words, for saying you disagree, the police put handcuffs on her and drug her out of her home in her pajamas for something she put on Facebook. Zig Heil, Australia. They threaten old women who are doing nothing but sitting on a park bench. Another woman was choked out by police for not masking. A construction worker riding his bike to work tackled off that bike by officers who were concerned he might not be carrying his appropriate papers to allow him to be out of his home. They knocked him off his bike, demanding, "We must see your papers." Guess what? He had them. No apology. A professor with cerebral palsy and her elderly mother were not allowed to sit on a park bench and rest. We're told to move along. You cannot stop here. You must continue to walk, or you may infect somebody. This is Nazi power. Nazi power. For a disease, I just told you. I just gave you the stats. Yeah. Your odds of dying, if you get it, between 0 and 19 or up to 20 years, just below 20, 99.997%. From 20 to 49 years, if you're under 50, 99.98%. If you get it, you're not going to die. 50 to 69 years of age, 99.5%. And even old folks in their 80s and 90s, almost a 95% chance of survival. And that includes if you have in the numbers comorbidities. Do you see the stupidity that our world has engaged in this fear of a virus? We lock ourselves down. We lock ourselves down for what? Fines. They've totaled $2 million United States kind of currency in that province. And the government there is planning to enact even more restrictions, not less, with an omnibus emergency measure. You know, you were lied to and I was lied to when I did my work in emergency management. You know, the experts that try to tell the governors and even the president and others what to do, they've been lying to everybody. And I believe that Dr. Anthony Fauci is one of the biggest liars that ever walked the face of the earth. I mean, I'm serious. The man cannot be trusted. He dismisses any good news. It can't be happening. It's got to be bad news, bad news, bad news, bad news. If you go by the CDC's own numbers, 12,000 Americans, not 208,000 or whatever, died of COVID-19. And all the things we did to flatten the curve ended up doing really nothing but just extending the misery longer and causing other problems. You have people with depression, people that have lost their homes, people that have lost everything, people that have committed suicide because their freedoms have been robbed by these power barons, like the ones in Victoria, Australia. Hitler would be proud. They're going to extend the power of law enforcement to restrict movements and allow them to preemptively detain you if you test positive because they think you might not comply. Thank the Lord some retired judges have come out and attorneys opposing these rules as unprecedented, excessive, and totally open to abuse. These heavy-handed tactics have been protested by Australians, and when they do, they get arrested. You know, why have we allowed this? Look in Australia, they have seen less than 900 deaths, and out of the 27,000 cases that they think they've caught, you know, most of them have all recovered. And in spite of all these lockdowns, the highest rate of the deaths have actually been in Victoria. Particularly when I worked in emergency management earlier this year, I did a lot of reading from a lot of good think tanks and researchers, that not generally stuff that you find in the public eye. And everybody was making fun and condemning Sweden for what they did. They didn't lock down. They didn't do all this draconian nonsense. Schools stayed open. People were just told to use some common sense. And for a period of time, their infection numbers rose rapidly, as did their death numbers. They admit they made some mistakes in not properly really doing what should have been done in nursing home facilities and among the elderly. But you know, now that the disease has worked its way through Sweden, suddenly their death percentages are rather low compared to many other. They're right in the middle of most Western developed nations. Yet now they're not seeing any new cases or any new deaths or any new hospitalizations to even of any significant number. They're not there. stuff that I read told me to look for in the United States, to look for your little second bump in the summertime. It would vary from place to place. Because of our draconian measures, we slowed the curve. We flattened it, but the area underneath the curve remains the same. The same number of people will ultimately be infected. The same number will ultimately die. All we did was just spread it out a little bit. That's it. Don't trust your media. Most of it will lie to you. That's what I've been trying to tell you in the program. I'm going to give you my mailing address for those that would like to have it. It is Truth to Ponder, 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, Sky Valley, Georgia, 30537. That is Truth to Ponder, 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, in Sky Valley, Georgia, and that zip code is 30537.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth, 2, and the word ponder.com. That's truth, 2, ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.